Okay, I'm recording.
We have everything on.
Ach so, weil ich mein Dings-Setting habe. So.
Yeah.
Can you hear us?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So we can hear you too.
But now we're using. The iPad. So is there a possibility that we can make an appointment that somebody's come over and show us how it works?
So at 10 o'clock,
Yes,
first Mr. Mathias will speak and then Helmut will take the floor, right?
no, no, it is, let's say, I will say a word of welcome
Okay, I will do it.
to the group.
Okay.
Pardon?
Thanks, bye.
I will say, I'm the chairman,
Yeah.
so I will say a word of welcome. And then I will give the floor to Mr. Geuking.
Yeah. So you will do the introduction and then Mr. Golking will speak for 5 minutes.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And then we give the floor to, okay, then I see that I have put myself for another 5 minutes, but I will not say much. I will not say so much. And then we go to Mathias Urban, Professor Mathias Urban as the main speaker.
Yeah, and we will leave you then because we've got an ample committee meeting.
Yes.
You're aware of that. So
Yes, yes.
after the 5 minutes, Mr. Goiken will leave, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay, perfect.
That's okay. But I also wanted to bring you in contact with Mr. Mathias Urban, so that you can have a follow-up at a certain moment.
That sounds good.
By the way, welcome to Isabel too.
Yeah,
Isabel
welcome,
Hi.
Isabel.
I'm so glad to see you again.
Yes, yes.
I'd like to interrupt. Sorry for this. You know that Mr. Goiken will speak in German and I will translate it to English.
Yes, we know.
Unfortunately, it will cause, well, I hope you can hear us well.
Yes.
It will cause, well, it will be time consuming.
Yes, it doesn't matter.
Okay,
And but we very much appreciate that Mr. Geuking wants to join us in this meeting, as if we are in the parliament, as if we are in the parliament.
Thanks
Yes.
a lot. Thanks a lot.
Yeah.
Michi,
Yes.
can I just ask you? I prepared a short presentation. Will I be able to share my screen?
Yes. Yes. I think that is okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Could you try first, Matthias? Can I ask you to try share the screen just to see if I have to?
Can you please enable the screen sharing?
Okay. Wait. It seems that you are unable to share it.
Yeah, you have to go to where it says share screen on your computer.
Yes, probably I will do like that. Wait, because I have to manage also by my wait, because I don't know how to
where it says share screen.
Yes, I know, but it's wait, I have to allow you to share the screen. So this is why I'm wait. Okay. Share computer. Because I did it once. I did it with my mobile, and now I have to see how I can allow you to. Okay. Okay. Try now.
It's
Hello,
working
Catherine.
now.
It's working now?
Yes, it's coming up.
Okay.
Yeah,
Great.
there it goes.
Okay. Okay.
That seems fine.
Okay, it's working.
Hello, Catherine.
Hello. Hello, Yakara.
Yes.
Hello, Catherine. Hi.
Welcome,
Hey,
Christopher.
Christopher. Good to see you again.
Yes, the same. Okay. Nice to see you again.
Yakara, do you have an idea where we will be able to come back to the Parliament building and have our session physically?
Not yet, but we will ask to because now they stop the event, so we have the assistant of Ms. Gerling. We can ask to her when they are going to open for events too. But for the moment, not yet.
Okay.
I mean, all the meetings are having all the meetings through Zoom, by the way, even the commission. So I don't think that the Parliament will be different. Okay. Wait.
Yakara, may I ask if people here do mind if I take a picture of the screen to put on our website?
Yes, we will ask them both to picture, to have picture, to take picture, and to if they agree on recording the QoC. Mikkel, sorry, I was saying that we will at the beginning we will ask to everybody if they agree on record the event, the meeting, and Catherine was asking me if she can ask also to take picture of the screen.
Okay.
Okay, so at the beginning, when everybody will be there, we'll ask first if they agree on both recording and taking picture.
Yes, okay.
Also wir sind jetzt hören die ganze Zeit schon. Ne?
Mr. Geuking has left, I think. So they
no, we're there. We're there.
You're there. Oh, sorry. Yes.
He's coming. Come on, Alex.
Good.
He's coming.
Anne, sorry.
Yes.
Can we take the chance to ask you when, if the Parliament already allows to have event, to host event, or nothing yet?
Everything
You know already a date or not yet?
Well, it was sent end of September, and well, you could actually plan events as of end September, so beginning of October, and then it would be confirmed 10 days before whether it has happened or not. But it looks like that it's completely the opposite. So whatever has been planned for September is already cancelled, and probably everything will be cancelled for afterwards. For the moment, it's nobody at neither place. Only the liaison offices can be used.
Okay. Thanks a lot for this insight.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Hello. Welcome. We wait a few minutes more. It is now 10 o'clock. But I think we are waiting for... Where is Daniel? Is he there?
Not yet.
Not yet. And Shanti?
Shanti is joining right now.
And Fenne Bagust, is she there?
Not
Brioni
yet.
is not there. Brioni is not yet there.
No.
Elliot is there. Marion is there. Sheena Stewart.
Not yet.
Not yet there. Nicole.
Not yet.
Not yet. Helma is there. Priya is there. Georg is there.
Can I ask to everybody to mute the mic while they are not talking, so we avoid background noises? Thank you.
we wait a few more minutes to let the last people get in.
Mm-hmm.
I have the other monitors here on the, but as you are going, maybe place it.
Das ist weg. Achso, ja, okay, da kommen wir nichts.
Shanti, Daniel is aware that we start at 10 o'clock. I cannot hear you, yeah?
Yes, Daniel is aware and Fenna will also join.
Okay, I see Claudio here. That's good. Welcome, Claudio.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Welcome, Claudio.
Yes, it's good to see you. But I think we should nearly start.
Dieses Bild des Rückgrats nicht übersetzt. Das ist ein anderes Wort für Rückgrat. Menschen ohne.
I think we. What time is it now?
Nee, also ein anderes Bild.
10:04. So
we wait one
we
more
can
minute.
We
wait one more minute and then we start. Yeah. Hello, Claudio.
Menschen ohne Selbstbewusstsein.
Okay, Michael, Priya has to leave because he's.
Direkt übersetzt, without a backbone, das sagt man nicht, verstehst du? Deswegen suche ich noch ein anderes Bild.
Michael?
Yes.
Priya, she has to leave because she has some school issue to solve.
Okay.
Der wusste irgendwie was abholen. So eine Scheiße.
I think we start now. We start.
Es geht los. Ja, sag was anderes. Selbstbewusstsein, Self-Confidence, irgendwie so weiter.
It is a great pleasure for me to welcome you here to the 77th QoC session. We started in 2006, and this is the 77th time. And it is the first time that we do this via Zoom. So welcome, and it is a new experiment. I'm also very happy that Mr. Göking was willing to cooperate with us and to co-host this meeting. Now I give the floor to Mr. Göking to say a few words, to share a few words with us. And Mr. Göking will speak in German, and that afterwards will be translated.
Ja, ich freue mich, heute Morgen hier zu sein und ich begrüße Sie recht herzlich.
I'm delighted to be with you today, and I want to welcome you warmly to this Zoom meeting.
Wie Ihnen bekannt ist, geht es um die internationale Studie der OECD für frühe kindheitlicher Wohlbefinden und frühes Lernen.
We want to discuss today, as you all know, the international OECD study, the latest study about early well-being and learning of children.
Und die Frage, ob das der richtige Weg ist für Europa.
We want to ask the question whether this is the right way for Europe.
Ich selbst persönlich kenne da nicht die Antworten.
I personally, of course, do not know the answer to this question.
Ich weiß aber eines.
But I do know one thing for sure.
Wir sollten alle ein Interesse daran haben, die Qualität der Kindheit zu verbessern.
We all have an interest in improving quality of childhood of children and of children.
Wir müssen sehen, dass unsere Kinder auch entsprechend den Raum für Kindheit gegeben wird.
We must give the space to our children so that they can live childhood.
Kinder lachen, wohlfühlen, sich wohlfinden. Das sind Werte, die wir vermitteln müssen. Das sind Werte, die wir unterstützen und Werte unserer Gesellschaft, die wir vermitteln müssen.
Children that are to laugh, they are to feel well, they are to feel self-confident, and these are values that we all are to support. It's the values of our society, and our society is to support these values.
Es muss gelingen, die frühe Entwicklung der Kinder an die Lebenswirklichkeit auszurichten und dabei das Wohlbefinden der Kinder im Blick zu haben.
We must succeed in making sure that early development of children does take place according to the reality of life, and at the same time the children, while being prepared to reality of life, must feel well.
Nicht immer schneller, immer größer, immer besser sind die Werte, sondern Mitmenschlichkeit sind unsere Werte, die wir entsprechend vermitteln und die vielleicht in diesen Studien nicht immer so gemessen werden.
Bigger, faster, higher. These are not always the right values. It's much more about human values that are to be communicated to our children. And I'm not sure whether these human values and the values of humanity are taken into consideration by these international OECD study.
Kurz gesagt, Mensch sein und menschlich werden.
So it's all about being human and for our children to become human.
Also eines weiß ich ganz gewiss, wir wollen die Zukunft unserer Gesellschaften, das sind die Kinder, entsprechend zu einem selbstbestimmten Leben heranführen und wir wollen ihnen unsere Werte, die Werte einer Gesellschaft wie Europa vermitteln, die europäischen Werte. Wie der richtige Weg ist und ob das die OECD-Studie hier nochmal belegt, kann ich Ihnen abschließend nicht sagen.
Well, what I do know is that the future of our society are our children, and we want to work for the future of our society, so our children. And we want these children to live a self-determined life as adults. And so we have certain values to do so. And these values is what we try to communicate to our children. It's European values. The right way to communicate these values, that's another question. So I do not have the patent. I do not know what is the right way to communicate our values, human values, European values to our children. And well, whether the OECD study is the right way to do so, well, that's a question I am not capable to answer.
Eines weiß ich aber ganz gewiss, dass gerade solche Veranstaltungen wie heute Morgen, diese Veranstaltung und Sie, meine Damen und Herren, Sie sind die Menschen, genau wie Herr Mathias und Dr. Mathias Urban, die Kleines anstoßen, um im Endeffekt Großes zu bewegen und unsere Gesellschaft positiv zu verändern.
But I do know for sure that events like this Zoom meeting, that you, ladies and gentlemen, you are the people like like Mr. Mathias, like Dr. Urban as well, who do little steps that bring about lots of results. These little steps make sure that our society develops in a positive way.
Und daher wünsche ich für dieses Meeting heute gutes Gelingen.
So I wish you all the best for this today's meeting.
Und ich bin mir sicher, dass Sie heute entsprechend den Ausschlag geben werden, um die Studie entsprechend genau zu hinterfragen. Menschen wie Sie sind es, die hier nicht alles einfach so hinnehmen, sondern wirklich hinterfragen und entsprechend agieren. Und dafür wünsche ich Ihnen heute viel Erfolg und auch viel Spaß. Und ich freue mich recht herzlich, dass Sie heute sich die Zeit nehmen, um dieses wichtige Thema zu besprechen.
What I do know for sure is that I wish you all the best for today's meeting, and I do know for sure that you today will ask the right questions, because it's people like you who do not simply accept everything. You ask questions and then you act accordingly. And I wish you every success with your endeavor in today's meeting. And I want to thank you cordially for giving your time and for working for our future and our children's future.
Yeah.
Thanks a lot, once again.
Mr. Goeking, thank you very much for your kind words and for your encouraging words, and also for working together with you. And we will give a follow-up to this to this session also. And also there is a lot of written material, but we will follow up, and we really enjoy working together with you and to give you input in also the work that you are doing.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Ich finde das wundervoll. Ich finde das wundervoll, muss ich ehrlich gestehen. Und wir haben alle ein gemeinsames Ziel, und das Ziel ist es halt, die Qualität der Kindheit deutlich zu verbessern und das Wohlbefinden der Kinder zu steigern und die Kinder auch zu behüten und zu beschützen.
Well, it's really wonderful. We really appreciate what you are doing, and our objective is the same for all of us. We want to improve the quality of life of our children. We want to make sure that well-being does take place for our children. And that's I'm so grateful. Thanks a lot for all what you are doing in this sense.
Okay, thank you.
Michael,
yes.
Can I say that if everybody is if we record this QoC, so also the presentation, the introduction of Ms. Gerdy, is it okay for everybody if we record this this session?
Yeah, yes, it's very good.
Okay, thank you.
Even take picture?
And also Catherine wants to take a few pictures of the screen. So we also ask allowance for that.
Also auch die Bilder, dürfen Sie die Bilder gebrauchen?
Ja, selbstverständlich.
You're welcome.
Okay, good. Then I just want to introduce to you Mathias Urban. He has spoken already several times in our QoC talks. And I have written down here on the 20th of June 2017, we held a QoC talk on the subject of the pros and the cons of OECD's International Early Learning Study. Anna, you can put the
yes. Sorry, Anna. I mute your microphone, so I muted already. As a host, I did it already, just to avoid background noise.
Yeah. The pros and cons of OECD's International Early Learning Study. So we discussed that in June 2017. And then we had as a speaker Rowena Fair of the OECD and Professor Mathias Urban. And as a follow-up, Mathias Urban contributed to volume 7 of our book, Improving the Quality of Childhood, a chapter with the title Devaluation, D between commas, Devaluation of Early Childhood Education and Care, a critique of OECD's International Early Learning Study. So, and this session in a way, because the study of the OECD has been completed, has been published this year in March, and Peter Moss and Mathias Urban have written a paper on it in a way to discuss the outcome and the whole approach. And it is an honor for us and a great opportunity. And I'm very glad that Mathias can join us and share now his ideas about this with this group. So Mathias, the floor is yours, and very welcome in this group, this Zoom meeting.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for inviting me to join this group and to present to you. My name is Mathias Urban. I'm speaking to you from my kitchen table in Dublin, Ireland, but I usually work for Dublin City University, where I'm a professor of early childhood education and director of the Early Childhood Research Center. And I work quite often in collaboration with Professor Peter Moss from the Institute of Education, University College London. And this presentation is based on one of our collaborations. So it is about the International Early Learning and Child Wellbeing Study. The acronym is IELS, which has been in the making for some years now. The first reports have been published in March this year. And I would like to present a few thoughts about the first results, some sort of interpretations of what has been reported by the OECD. The presentation is based on this article published in the International Journal of Contemporary Issues in Early Childhood. There is a link on your screen. The paper is free to download, so it's an open access paper. And it's basically called the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development's International Early Learning and Child Wellbeing Study. The scores are in. What's the background to all this? We know about IELS since around, in public, since around 2015. When it was first announced, and there was a call for tenders published by the OECD to organize and coordinate and run this study. Since it was announced in 2015, a number of authors around the world have followed the development of this project with critical eyes. And I just give you some references on the right-hand side of your screen. Papers from around the world, from Europe, the US, from Europe, from Italy, from Belgium, from New Zealand, from Canada, have looked at the developments of this standardized assessment of young children and asked the question, is this the way forward? Is this what we actually need, or are we missing an important opportunity here? Peter Moss and I, we've written a series of short papers, a so-called colloquia, for this journal, Contemporary Issues in Early Childhood. And the one we're talking about today, the most recent one, marks the publication of the reports of the first round of the OECD study. We discuss in this paper what the results tell us, what they do not tell us, and what might come next. Our conclusion, and I'm just going to present the conclusion first, is that we do urgently need comparative studies of early childhood education, that we need to learn from and with each other, and specifically in a context as diverse as Europe. But we do argue that the International Early Learning and Child Wellbeing Study is not the way to go. We can do better than these standardized assessments. A short timeline as a reminder. IELS was first proposed by the OECD's Early Childhood Education Care Network, which is a network of countries, government representatives that advise OECD on matters early childhood policies. In 2015, we had a call for tender to design, develop, and pilot this study. This was awarded to a consortium led by the Australian Council for Educational Research in 2016. In 2017, we learned that 3 countries were to participate in this study: England, the United States, and Estonia. And we also learned that nearly all other OECD member states declined to participate in this study. And in 2018, the main study got underway. So here we are in 2020, autumn 2020. It is the 1st of September. It's autumn, actually. It's hard to believe. So here we are after 4 years of development, testing 7,000 children, spending a lot of money, millions of dollars, pounds, and euros. The results were published in March, with 3 national reports published, 1 for each participating country, England, Estonia, and the USA, and a full report and a summary report. And I provided the link here to the summary report on the OECD website. And from there, you can find your way to the country reports, should you be interested, or to the full report. The main findings were also presented by Andreas Schleicher and Norina Fair, who coordinated the study for the OECD in a webinar, which has been reported, and there's a YouTube link for you in case you want to sort of follow up on that. What is IELS? It is a cross-national assessment of 5-year-olds on 4 so-called early learning domains: early literacy, numeracy skills, self-regulation, social and emotional skills. It's based, according to OECD, on developmentally appropriate interactive stories and games delivered on a tablet device. And we've written about this methodology critically as well, testing children by agents that are not familiar with children with this sort of technology approach. The study is supplemented by information, so-called contextual information, which is mainly the individual background of children, home learning environment, early child education experience, children's skills. And this information is collected from staff and parents via questionnaires. This is what we're talking about, and this has been rolled out in the 3 countries, Estonia, England, and the US. And I have to emphasize England in this case, because not the entire United Kingdom has taken part. Only England, Wales, Scotland, and Northern Ireland, the 3 other countries in the United Kingdom, declined to take part in that study. So what do we know now after the reports are out? What do the results tell us? I suppose we can say confidently, in a nutshell, they don't tell us very much that we didn't know already. We do learn from the reports that there are gender differences and socioeconomic differences in test performance. Girls do better on emergent literacy and social-emotional skills. Poor children do worse on all measures. And that's reiterating much previous work. There's not much surprise in here. We also learn that what parents do is important for their children, and that children from advantaged families, on average, have more learning opportunities than children from disadvantaged families. Children in advantaged families are more likely to live in families with more than 100 children's books, we learn from the reports. And again, none of this comes as a surprise. We knew this already. We also learned that there are differences in children's test performance across the 3 countries, with the children from Estonia performing best overall. And the OECD tells us Estonia had the smallest differences among children based on their socioeconomic backgrounds, whereas the greatest differences were found in the United States. And I ask you whether or not this comes as a surprise. We also learned from the reports that there are substantial differences between the 3 countries in terms of demographic and socioeconomic indicators, and also for early childhood policy and provision. Estonia, by far the smallest in population, compared to 24 million children in the US. But Estonia with the lowest levels of inequality and child poverty, and the best developed policies and provision. Despite being a rich country, and producing, as you might be aware if you're interested in this field, copious amounts of research and publications about early child education and care, which, by the way, the OECD reports rely on very heavily. Provision and policy and services for young children and families in the USA, and the conditions of young children in that country are very poor. Just a few examples from the national report for the US, published in March on this study. The OECD reminds us that this distribution of wealth is highly unequal in the US, that the country is unique among countries, among OECD countries, in having no statutory entitlement to paid maternity, paternity, or parental leave. It has a highly fragmented early childhood landscape. Provision is, childcare is expensive. Early childhood educators have salaries so low that they are eligible for or receive public financial assistance. So working conditions are poor, as are conditions for children and families in that country. And we learn that in the US, for instance, attendance at center-based early childhood programs is highest among children from high-income families, because they're the ones who can afford to pay for that. So maybe some first conclusions about the reports and about this whole IELS exercise. The first conclusion I think we can draw from this will be, when we read the reports, is that yes, it is possible to construct a standardized test of young children in different countries. If you have enough time, enough expertise, if you have enough money, yes, we can do this. The question is not whether we can, but why? Why would we? Why should we do this? And then, of course, what we learn from the reports is, and throughout the entire development of the study, from beginning in the first years, from 2012 to now, the reports make no reference or response to the many and varied reservations raised about the study by policymakers, by the early childhood profession, by practitioners, by scholars from around the world. There is no discussion in the reports or in the presentation of why so few countries agree to participate in that study. And there is no explanation of the position that the OECD takes, and Peter Moss and I, we talk about the possibility of different paradigmatic positions that you can take when you look at how to best evaluate an early childhood system. What is your understanding of and the meaning of being a child in a particular society? How can we learn from each other across differences? What are the value bases behind rearing children, and what, in consequence, are the values that underpin early child education and care in various countries? So the OECD takes that for granted and does not deal with the possibility that there are differences. In short, and I think this is a rather serious matter for, especially in the context of the European Union, is we find that the OECD deals with criticism and questioning by simply ignoring it. And that needn't be the case. We could have an open discussion about this. So let's move on and talk about what the reports do not tell us. And again, in a nutshell, we believe that there's an awful lot that we don't learn from the reports. So for instance, and I just mentioned it, we don't hear anything about the rationale for the selection of the 3 countries that participated, whose 5-year-olds are in very different types of settings. In a primary school in England, in preschool in Estonia, in school or preschool in the US. To what useful question could a comparison between these very different countries provide a useful answer? We don't learn this from the reports. We don't learn from the reports, for instance, how many children were selected for testing in each country, and how the selection of children was undertaken in the USA, which is an important consideration given the size of the country, its federal structure, 51 states, and the very large differences existing between the 50 states. The US the report vaguely refers to a representative sample of 5-year-olds enrolled in registered schools or preschools in each participating country. But then again, that raises more questions than it answers. We don't learn anything about possible explanations for what the report calls disruptive behavior that is reported more to be more prevalent in young boys than girls. There is some attribution to disruptive behavior and a connection made to things like a lack of self-regulation, a lack of inhibition skills, but that, I would say, individualizes a phenomenon without any indication of possible systemic or contextual explanations. We don't hear anything about what exactly are these young boys disrupting. What cultural and what class biases and institutional constraints might possibly underlie these expectations, and what exactly characterizes non-disruptive behavior, approved behavior in these settings. We don't see that reported or discussed or even addressed in these reports. We don't learn anything about how the overall early child education care systems in each country work, how they function. And that, I think, is particularly important for the discussion in the context of the European Union, because it contradicts what I call an emerging global systemic turn and a recognition of the importance of whole systems and whole of government approaches to young children and families and early childhood systems. To give you 2 examples, the World Bank Initiative Systems Approach for Better Education Results, for instance, has been subject to fundamental critique about its approaches, but it acknowledges that any early childhood program is embedded in complex cultural, economic, and political systems which need to be taken into consideration when evaluating their impact. On another level, and yet another level, the Group of 20, the G20 Leaders Summit, commits to building international consensus on government responsibility for a whole systems approach to early childhood development and early child education care policies. And I'm privileged and honored to be leading the development of these policy briefs around early childhood for one of the official engagement groups for the G20, the Think 20 global network of research institutes and think tanks. And then, of course, we don't learn anything about what has been called the culture of early child education care in the 3 participating countries. And we can sort of look at this as an intricate weave of traditions, influences, theories, concepts, constructions, images of the child, the work of the parent, the service, the centers, and the procedures and practices and that shape understandings of what services are about and what constitutes good practice or good work in them. All this is sort of it's not in the frame of the OECD reports. We don't learn anything about how early childhood systems in the 3 countries address questions of diversity and inequality among children, families, communities, beyond what seems to underlie these reports, a prevailing deficit model, in which diversity is seen as a problem that needs fixing. For example, when we learn that multilingualism is quite often framed as a deficiency in the dominant language rather than an asset for children who speak multiple languages. We don't learn very much about what might explain the national differences in test performance. Why, for example, would it be that Estonia, and I quote, had the smallest differences amongst children based on their socioeconomic backgrounds, whereas the greatest differences were found in the United States? We ask, might this be because Estonia has a stronger welfare state and lower inequality? And we can refer to the work of Wilkinson and Pickett in 2009 for this. And then, of course, there is what we think is quite an interesting omission. The full report contains no discussion, conclusions, and sort of that would tell us what we have learned from this study. And then, of course, and when we're talking to policymakers, one of the questions that, again, is not addressed in the reports is how will countries use what we learned from a standardized test like IELS to make, as the OECD as the OECD's ambition is, to make faster progress on improving children's early learning experience if they're able to learn from other countries and systems, if we don't learn anything about the systems. How might that actually happen? How and what might countries learn from the first round of the IELS study? What might England learn from Estonia and vice versa? How might the US Federal Department of Education brief President Trump on what might be important results of that study? So what next? I suppose what we're saying is that the IELS makes no attempt to explain or justify its paradigmatic or disciplinary positioning, which we identify as one that is very much framed by positivism, developmental psychology, and the general idea of a universal child that can universally be tested and assessed. And it's also, and we've written about this in an earlier paper, underpinned by a very strong Anglophone orientation, considering the contractors undertaking the work, the experts advising the study, or the countries participating. And we believe it does confirm what Loris Malaguzzi from Reggio Emilia calls Anglo-Saxon testology, which he says is nothing but a ridiculous simplification of knowledge and a robbing of meaning from individual histories. And I would like to discuss that with you. Concerning too, we believe, is the OECD's global ambition, because the IELS is only one study in an array of, in a fast-growing array of international standardized assessments conducted by the OECD. You will be familiar with the Program for International Student Assessment, PISA. We have the PISA-based test for schools. We have PISA for development, which is a sort of PISA version for low and middle income countries, which has been heavily criticized, for instance, for its claims of universality and how they contradict, for instance, people's rights and communities' rights to self-determination in education. And we only need to look at the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, for instance, to identify these contradictions. We have a study on of 10 and 50-year-old children on social emotional skills. We have TALIS, the Teaching and Learning International Survey. We have the Program for International Assessment of Adult Competencies, and now we have IELS. So we believe that there is sort of an ambition towards a global governance of education in a particular way that is very much very much unaccountable, because there is no democratic sort of process behind this, and that it is presented as well, as a way forward without alternatives, and I heavily doubt that this is what we should be supporting. What next for IELS? It has got off to a shaky start in a way, you could say, with only 3 countries signing up. Immediate goal for the OECD, we believe, has to be more signings for the next cycle of OECD, of IELS, which we hear is in preparation this year. And Andreas Schleicher, the OECD Director of Education, referred to this in the webinar where he launched the study, where he made the connection to PISA, saying PISA itself started small. This initial round of IELS is an invitation to other countries to participate. It's now up to other countries to take up the challenge to see how their 5-year-old children are faring. So we can expect the OECD to lobby national governments hard to participate in the next round of IELS, and we should be prepared for this. We do believe that IELS is actually a wasted opportunity given the resources and the time and the expertise put into this project. We do believe, as I said at the beginning, that we urgently need to learn with and from and across countries, regions, approaches. So we do need comparative studies in early child education. We do need cross-country evaluation, but not in this very simplistic and narrow way. We do see that IELS is one example, like these other studies, is one example of comparison as a mode of governance rather than a mode of learning with each other. And Nova talks about dataism as a religion of data, which he says, entails a belief in global solutions imposed by data and evidence on what works, where the best results are, and what is called a false idea of consensus on the aims of education, what education might be for, and how we might achieve that. Instead, we concur with Novor that comparative studies and sort of cross-cultural evaluation should be part of a science of difference. It should be about provoking thought by encounters with difference and recognizing the world's rich diversity and complexity. And it's also a reminder that education is not primarily a technical endeavor. Standards, indicators, measurements, arrangements, but it is a political, it's a profoundly political endeavor about meaning, purposes, values, and ethics. And we are very concerned that the IELS reports confirm the OECD's reluctance to delve into such complexity and diversity, and by simply sort of ignoring it or framing it as a problem. Instead, it reduces education to easily measured and governed common outcomes, which calls a culture of fast knowledge, in which which can be measured is true knowledge. And maybe finally, just to wrap up, the publication and our seminar behind computer screens on Zoom is an example of this. The publication of the reports comes at a time of unprecedented and rapidly unfolding global crisis. We really have to question of how we can secure humanity's survival on a finite planet. And these questions have moved from hypothetical to urgent, with the convergence of climate crisis, global pandemic, economic crisis in many parts of this planet. And we believe that for early childhood education and care to make a meaningful contribution to sustainability and to social and ecological justice, we will have to shift our focus quite radically from assessing narrow and predetermined early learning outcomes to pedagogies of uncertainty, of exploration, and to embrace what Paulo Freire terms untested feasibility. And I do believe that Europe can and should do better than IELS. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can you, yeah. So Mathias, thank you very much for this very condensed presentation. And I open the floor straight away for questions.
those who wants to talk could put a reaction,
I think
this one.
open the all the
And
microphones.
in case there are line people.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, Danielle.
Yeah, I've heard with attention what's wrong about the study, but I haven't heard clearly a proposal of what to do differently. And I'm curious to know more about that.
Okay.
So go ahead, Mathias.
Oh, well, I mean, let's stay within the framework of the OECD, because the OECD itself has shown that there are other ways of doing this. When we go back to the beginning of the OECD's engagement with early childhood education and care in the 1990s and early 2000s, we have seen the publication of 2 landmark studies, and there are still landmark studies in the field, involving some 20 countries, OECD member states, and they're the so-called Starting Strong 1 and Starting Strong 2 reports, at the time coordinated by John Bennett. John Bennett, who sadly passed away a couple of years ago now. And these reports are, I believe, still a wonderful example of how you can carefully and respectfully come to an understanding of what early childhood education and care systems are about in the participating countries, what the political, economical, historical, cultural context is, how this context shapes the very institutions that we talk about, because the history of early childhood education in Finland is different than to the history of early childhood education in France, or in Hungary, or in Germany, or in Italy, or in the United Kingdom, for instance. And these first two Starting Strong reports have clearly shown that we can carefully address this from multiple angles, involving teams of interested experts and professionals from the participating countries, but also from within the countries, having conversations, documenting them, and providing, and I think this is important for policymakers, not a quick fix of solutions, but providing a frame of saying, these are the policy questions emerging from this study, and these are the questions that you, policymaker, might want to address in your country when you look at developing and improving and furthering the early child education care system. So I think we can look to the OECD, how things can be done differently. Unfortunately, the OECD gave up on this rather complex approach and moved to something much more streamlined, much more standardized, as we see now, much more PISA style, rather than sort of embracing complexity. The other thing that I would say, Daniel, and I think this is really important, we tend to look at the big picture and then pick what we think is measurable or is comparable, and we quite often end up testing young children. And we see this in this example. The aim is to improve the early childhood system. That's the stated aim. But what we do is we develop a standardized test for 5-year-old children. We've seen this in a number of other countries, including the US and in Europe, the United Kingdom, where we have very developed standardized test procedures for young children. The problem with this is that, first of all, we know from research evidence that this is not very reliable, that the data produced this way from testing very young children, especially in the context of international comparison, is not reliable at all. And that's not our work, that is work conducted by others who are much more involved in this kind of work. But the problem, I think, is that instead of asking the question of the entire early childhood system, the policy, the institution, the professional preparation, the preparation of educators and childcare workers and teachers, the situation for families, the question of what does it mean to grow up in this particular country? What are the influences in terms of inequality in the countries? So I suppose my approach would be, first of all, guided by what we learned from the early OECD studies, take a careful, respectful approach to diversity in the country, and it would be secondly guided by an approach that we have been developing over years, where we talk about a competent system that we need to develop for children, families, and communities. And we need whole systems evaluation, not testing of decontextualized parts of that system. And the last thing we need is standardized testing of young children, and then sort of extrapolating from these tests to what we think the quality of the entire system is.
Thank you.
We do have some examples that this actually works, and it has been done.
Michiel, may I have 1 minute, please,
Yes,
just to
yes.
follow that up?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mathias, also for your previous presentation. You rightfully stressed system-wide change. I'd like to tell you about some bottom-up efforts also by the European Council of Steiner Waldorf Education, represented here, and the Learning for Wellbeing Foundation, to go to the very root of change. We have an Erasmus Plus project where we are talking to teachers in different settings to find out exactly how they, this side of utopia, how they introduce practices that go against the spirit of standardized testing and represent the contextualized approach that you have emphasized. And we hope to share our findings at a future Quality of Childhood session. Thank you.
I'd be very interested. And I suppose really what I'm trying to say is what we need is this bottom-up, this grassroots approach, but we also need a policy and systems approach, because we can't separate the different layers of the system, saying here's policy, here's research, and then we talk to the teachers. They are part of a picture, and we need to make connections across the elements of this picture. And this is what I call a competent system, if we have these connections. If we don't have them, we end up in frictions in communication, and we won't end up with an improvement of the systems that we're all aiming for.
There's a question. There is a question from Wendy. There is a question from Wendy.
Yes,
Can you open your?
Yes. Also, Georg asked to.
Okay,
to
Georg also. First Wendy,
yes.
then Georg.
Yeah, Mathias. Hi. I absolutely agree with everything, basically. But I guess I've become more and more involved with the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, and what I think is happening worldwide is this call for ecosystemic approaches is happening everywhere. And the conversations, I think what we've had is education in one box, well-being in another box, yeah. You know, all these different areas, and we haven't been connecting up the dots. So one, I'd love to work more closely with you and bring you into some of the discussions that are going on there. But it also makes me think that whole thing in the UK. I was very involved a few years ago in campaigning against just the things that you were talking about. But one of the reason I backed out and actually decided that I had to work globally was because we had exactly the same reaction from the UK government in terms of absolute non-response, no opportunity to go into dialogue, no, you know, no matter how big a group of experts we brought around, we were just not invited into a discussion that was, you know, going to take us forward. So I think this has to be done globally. I think it has to be done ecosystemically. I know in the UK, it's that difference between we could have young boys forced to start to read at 4 and 5. And yes, they would have all the indicators that would show that they'd passed the kind of what we expected of their reading test. But when they were 12 to 15, they didn't want to read. So that erosion of dispositions is such a profound aspect that it isn't just about measuring outcomes. We have to look at inputs. So I'm very interested in what you're doing. I'd say I'd love to talk with you outside of this, because I think this is I think the early years is the single most important period of life. So this is the one that should be at the forefront of everything. So yeah, that's just what I wanted to say.
Thank you. I think also it's not only, you have chosen to work globally, but I think it's also a matter of power. In a way, we must work towards to have more power and to force our governments to go in the direction that we find desirable in a dialogue with them.
Michael, that's the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, if you're not familiar with it, is actually looking at and is working with governments at government level. And that's why I find it such an interesting combination of people working with economic advisors. So you're starting to get the level of conversation that I think is really necessary to impact change.
Yes. I go back to Mathias. You want to give a reaction?
Well, I suppose I can only support this because I agree. We tend to put things in boxes, and we're beginning to see that unless we join the dots and we look at the bigger picture, we're not getting anywhere. And this is happening at national level, it's happening at institutional level, in schools, and it's happening at global level. And I think what I find interesting is that the OECD insists with this particular approach on a way forward that contradicts what we see happening on a global stage. And I think, Wendy, you're right. There is an increasing acknowledgement of the importance of complexity and whole systems approaches. So we can see, for instance, I mentioned that briefly, for 3 years running now, 2018, 19, and 20, the G20 has addressed early childhood development and early child education at highest global levels, and they are supporting very strongly, as I mentioned in this presentation, government responsibility for whole systems approaches. We have now we have policy briefs that have been adopted by the G20 leaders that talk about the importance of what has been mentioned, combining sort of grassroots approaches with government responsibility, enabling these grassroots and bottom-up approaches to work. We do now have, for instance, in the context of the global pandemic, we have a statement coming out of this global T20 group that says, in order to maintain social coherence in times of pandemics and crises, there are 3 key elements that you need to focus on. One is health, the other one is social welfare systems, and the third pillar is early child development and early child education. So there is a global trend towards, and I call this a systemic turn, which obviously hasn't reached the OECD, and I wonder why that is.
I have a question from Gillian.
Yes, but Georg first and then Gillian.
Yeah, but I like to give Gillian first because she is new in our group.
Okay.
So welcome in our group. She is from Le Furet in Strasbourg.
Yes, hello, thank you. Actually, my name's Gillian, and I'm actually British Canadian, but I've been living here in France for 20 some odd years. So I joined again, and I very much appreciated the presentation as I had first listened to this OCD presentation back in March when it came out, and was slightly horrified and saying, what is the community going to do about this? This is incredible. I'm fairly new at Furet, so I'm excited to see some familiar faces or names I've heard of before. I'm also a university student doing a doctorate on the relationship with nature in early childhood. And I think that this is very important, as we've seen through the lockdown period, that many children were very kept inside and were not able to have access to outside spaces. And we saw privileged children having access to outside spaces because in bigger houses with gardens, this was not necessarily an issue. that's a little segue into the subject I think is also important that we discuss when we're analyzing all these cross comparatives and when we're looking at how children develop. I'd like us at some point to introduce this subject as well in global development and well-being of childhood. Children's access to outside spaces and free movement. I think this is something that's interesting to look at with all the other subjects that we're talking about. As I do think it's key, this development. We're working with the faculty at the University of Sports, the Science of Sports, and I think it's very important and has been emitted, as I saw from the OECD report, clearly.
Speak in the microphone. Speak in the microphone.
Sorry, is that better?
Yeah, now it's okay.
Okay.
Keep it short because we, in a way, it's already 11 o'clock, I think.
Okay.
It's 2 minutes past 11.
Just to say that I would love to see the issue of access to access to outside space and free movement and play in nature as a part of one of the criteria that we put in these studies when we're looking at early child development and well-being. I'll end it there.
Thank you. Now I give Clara and then Georg. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Clara.
Yeah, I'm very, very happy with the critique that Mathias and Peter Moss have been writing to this study, because I'm also very fearful for standardized testing that omits all the important factors. And I think since Bronfenbrenner's ecological system theory of human development, we have all the evidence how the different levels work together. But I would also say we have to really also not forget that we can also work bottom up. And that's where I think that the training of the early childhood carers and educators is so much in need of getting the help they need, that they don't have to organize the schedules of their day according to programs that then prove or try to meet the criteria that are putting out there by the standardized testing, but that they can create the first living reality world for the children that is needed. And if we're thinking of ecology and moral development and all of that, the educators, the adults that are with the young child, they are the ones that need to be breathing and have the inner calm and the inner hope and the reassurance and the access to nature, yes, and all of that. So I would say we have to work from all levels, and the development, the training of the early childhood carers and educators is a really key, essential aspect that we need to focus on in the right way.
Thank you, Clara. Now I go to Georg.
Yes, thank you, Michiel. From what I understand, Mathias, you and also Helma are both members of the European Working Group on Early Childhood Education and Care. And you have stated that what you hope is that the research into education systems is going much more into the respectful understanding of the various systems in which the early childhood education and care is then taking place. And I was wondering now, as you are both members of that group that also seeks to better understand the education systems and learn from each other, what your experience in this group is in this regard, and whether they are going more into this systemic direction, or whether in the end, even in this setting, the tendency is more going towards this OECD approach with standardized tests. I would like to better understand how you experience that.
Well, I believe we have Geraldine Libro here, who's coordinating this group. If Geraldine, all I see is a black box, but I assume it's Geraldine Libro, who is coordinating this group. So she would be the person to bring into this conversation, obviously.
Maybe I give the floor to Geraldine now.
Maybe just very briefly. So I'm not going to talk about my experience in that group, but what I do believe is that it is an extremely important group, because it is not a group of critical scholars, but of country representatives. The European Union member states are represented at government level, at department level, and they influence, and they have the potential to influence the early childhood agenda in Europe. So I think it is a very important tool, and Geraldine and her team have been doing an excellent job to bring this group together and organize the conversation. I think, and there are some important sort of, results coming out of that collaboration in that group. I think now it will be important to look forward to the next iteration and say, actually, what are the questions that we should be addressing at EU level, and rather than to say this is part of the sort of an agenda that is developed for us, for the early childhood field, and we need to feed into that agenda. So I suppose
I think we should really give some time to Geraldine.
Yeah. So what are the questions we need to address now? And I think the group is an excellent place to do that.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, welcome, Geraldine.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm sorry I was able to join only a few minutes ago. I had some connection problem before, but I heard the question from Georg. In the working group, what we're doing is actually supporting exchange of learning, and we are not really trying to influence things which are really quite academic in terms of organizing the curriculum, the pedagogical framework, or how countries choose to assess children or not. So this is not something we are discussing, also because it's a national competence and we don't have competence at EU level to discuss these sorts of things. The topics we discuss in the working group are decided commonly by the member states. So the working group is organized to allow the member states to learn from each other for certain topics. And this time, during this 2-year period, they've asked to discuss about how to make the systems more inclusive and how to recruit and train the professionals who work in the sector. So we are not looking at all into assessment of children or anything. This is not one of our topics, and I don't think it will ever be, because this is something really of a national competence. We've started discussing a little bit what could be the topics for discussion in the next mandate of the working group. Hopefully that will start early next year. There's been a lot of interest in terms of how to evaluate quality. You know, we have this council recommendation, which was adopted last year with a European quality framework, which defines quality of early childhood based on 5 pillars. So we are looking at curriculum, staff, monitoring, governance, funding, and so on. And one question which came up from people who work in the ministries is how to evaluate the quality. How do we evaluate that we are actually funding what needs to be funded, that we are qualifying the professionals at the level required, all sorts of things. And they need to learn from each other in terms of processes and mechanisms to put in place to evaluate quality, so that as policymakers, they can better influence the way things are organized. So this is where we are at the moment with the working group. Does that answer your question?
This is wonderful what you are saying, and I think it would be great to when the mandate of the working group could be prolonged. And so that is good news.
It's not decided yet, but we have good hope.
And who should decide? Who is deciding?
It's the education committee, so really the ministers of education.
The ministers of education.
So
okay.
they will talk about that in the next 2-3 months. We will know.
Yeah. Who would like to react to this? Is it Mathias? You want to react to this?
Well, I suppose, as I said, I think this working group is a very important forum, and I agree with Geraldine. It is important because the member states set the agenda, and they discuss what is important for them to move forward in their national agendas. I also think it is very important to hear that member states are now beginning to realize that we have this tool. We have a European, we have council recommendations, and we have a quality framework that talks a lot about the importance of a systemic approach, and that talks a lot about some of the work that has actually been done and funded by the Commission prior to developing this framework. So there is a discussion happening, people on the ground, and I include policymakers as people on the ground in their countries, are beginning to show an interest in how can we actually understand quality in this case as something that is so complex. So that's really important. Where I would slightly differ in my understanding is not, I think while the EU does not have any powers, any sort of to determine member states' approaches in education or in early child education and care, we do need what the OECD is trying to do. We do need international comparison. We do need cross-cultural, cross-country learning and evaluation. So I would hope to see this group not just as a forum for member states to discuss and then take things home to their countries, but also for the OECD, for the EU, via this group, perhaps to take a lead in an international, in a global context and say, this is how you do systemic, holistic evaluation. And this is how we can learn through comparative studies. And I think the OECD should take a much stronger, the EU, sorry, I'm confusing my acronyms here. The EU should take a much stronger leadership role in this.
It could be in a way, we could try to put it in the mandate of the new mandate of the working group. Why not? To have, to prepare such a proposal. Geraldine, that could be, but anyway, Mathias is in the working group of the European Commission, so I think it would be good in a way if that it could also be, let's say, a follow-up of this Zoom meeting.
You can send your proposal to the Commission.
Yes, we can do it. So I think we should more or less wrap up because it is 11:15, and we agreed to finish at 11. So I think I want to finish with a quick wrap up and follow everybody to give everybody the chance to say something. So I start with Chiara. She's on the left top row.
No, I found really interesting all the presentation, and yes, I really appreciate if we can, as Mathias already wrote in the chat, to share the presentation, because I think there are some points that needs to be keep in mind and more to reflect on it, especially about the assessment that I really care of. And I want to thank you, Mathias, to share with us all this knowledge that he provided us. That's it.
Thank you, Chiara. Then I go to Natalia. Put on the microphone. Yes.
Okay, I'll mute finally. Thank you very much. I don't have much questions. It was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Then we go to Christopher. Unmute your microphone. Yes.
The Alliance for Childhood was started 23 years ago by a small group of people who were concerned about what was happening with early childhood. That is the roots on which we now are working. And I must say now, after all these years, it's good to see that we're now able to work at this level with colleagues who have the insight and courage to go against the prevalent norms of the time. And I think as a group, we really need to support this more and more, because actually it's a battle, and it's a battle about the future of the human soul. And it's in the early years that this is prevalent and is being attacked on so many fronts. And I think the Alliance is there that we feel united and can support colleagues like Mathias and Helma who are working on our behalf, and show our support for them to continue this battle, even though it seems we're fighting overwhelming odds.
Thank you, thank you. I go to Catherine.
Yeah, it was good to see you again, and it's nice to see how all we do is really diverse and complementary in each our domain, and whatever our function, we are trying to do our best. And I'm very worried because we have here the result of a study, but the world is changing so much that I'm really afraid that all what we have shared is really moving in the coming time. And I wonder really what's going on with this new situation. You know, we have the radio now telling us what is really about the children coming back to school today. And I'm so worried to acknowledge what their situation would be. And so everything is moving all the time. We can never fix something. And so see you next time to share whatever about that. And all the best to you all. Bye-bye.
Thank you, thank you. Now it is Wendy.
I actually feel very optimistic about the impact of COVID and what it's doing to humanity. So I think we're in a unique time, and I think it's making us look at what the priorities are. And I think early years is the single most important phase of what we need to look at. So I feel very positive about what's going on globally. And I think it's going to be a rough ride, but we've got opportunities now that we simply wouldn't have had without this kind of disruption. So
okay, thank you, thank you. I go to Shanti.
Thank you, Mikhail and Chiara for organizing this, and Mathias for stimulating us so much. My big takeaway from this morning is the importance of ongoing coordination, conversation, complementarity between systemic-wide change and what happens with what teachers do in classrooms every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Shanti. I go to Fenne. Unlock you.
Hi. So today was my first, the first time I actually joined a QoC call, and I think that I completely agree with what Wendy said, that we should take the opportunities that we were given by Corona to work globally to ensure that there is some kind of global cooperation to ensure that the early years do receive the right type of education, or the right type of what's the word? Sorry. That they get the right attention that they should receive. Thank you. That was my way for
Thank you. Thank you. I go to Marion. Marion is in London. Fenne is in Groningen. Groningen in the north of the Netherlands. Marion, this for you.
Yes, I'd just like to say that for the early years, the most important thing is play.
Play, yes.
Standardized testing is forcing young children to sit at desks.
Yes, that's a good word. I haven't heard the word play. That is true. It belongs in the whole thing. Yes. Thank you, Marion. We go to Georg.
Yes, thanks everybody. To me, it became...
Georg is in Munich. Yes, go ahead, Georg.
Yeah, indeed, I'm in Munich right now. Thanks again for this very interesting presentation. And I think the little conversation about the working group really showed that we should all try to help, if we can in any way, to make sure that for the follow-up we can again get a good team of experts into this group to do something for the quality of childhood at the EU level. It's very good to hear your assessment on this group, Matthias. Thank you.
Okay, Maria, where are you located, in London or in Italy? Put your microphone on.
No, I'm in London at the moment. Thank you. I'm glad to tie up with the word play, because what I haven't heard much about is actually the role of artistic education, and I look forward to reading more of the papers to see if I can find other inspiration there as we deal with music and the play part of music. So I think it was a fascinating roundup, and I just would like to stress that play has two meanings also in terms of playing and singing as well. So I think that is part of the early education for us as well. Thank you.
Thank you. I go to Clara.
Yes, thank you all for organizing, and Matthias for the rich contribution. I'm very happy that there are people who are looking with such positive criticism to such studies that keep us all awake. And I think the COVID situation can help us to take a pause and bring back to mind what really matters. And I just hope that we will not forget and fall back to sleep.
Yes, thank you. I go to Daniel.
Well, I'm grateful for this opportunity. I heard Matthias referring to the importance of thinking systemically. And I would like us to remind ourselves of the need to look at a human being as a very complex system in itself, and educating him to learn how to manage as a system is to think about everyone else around as complex system and include them in the process. When we are objectivizing the situation, like with standard testing, we are living not in reality. So I agree 100% with what has been said.
Thank you. I go to Gillian.
Thank you very much. I agree with everyone, and we're very much awake here in Strasbourg, and we plan on being to defend all of these principles and values that you've shared today, and very grateful to hear all this interesting contributions. So we would love to stay in touch. Thank you for inviting us.
Yes, and thank you for joining, because it is Le Furet is already for a long time a partner of the Alliance for Childhood, but it's for the first time that somebody from this group is joining us. So welcome again. I go to Ilona.
Hi, thank you for this presentation. I arrived a little bit later because I was actually getting to know the school of my daughter, who's 2.5 this morning, and I have to say it was very hard to choose. and so I was resonating with the. Thank you so much, Matthias, for this really detailed nitpicking work of looking through all these details, and because a huge amount of time has to be invested to get to this level of detail. So I think it was nourishing, and I agreed with Gillian and Clara about about the aspects, the factors, and the what to identify as a meaningful measurement tool, and such as nature and the contact with nature, and then about this idea of it can also go from the bottom up, and how we really need to focus on that too. Anyway, that was where I was this morning, trying to motivate a school that was just about to close and giving them ideas. So thank you.
Thank you for joining. Ilona is in Brussels, and she works in the office of X-Way. I go to Richard, and Richard is the chairman of European Council of Steiner Waldorf Education. Richard, nice that you could join us.
I'm very grateful
for the presentation of Mathias. And I only want to summarize it in that way, that we in the European Union must find an own position compared with the OECD, where we really take the well-being of the child in the center. And I was very happy by these contributions where some key topics were brought in: play, arts, relation to nature, and I would like to add two other ones: the whole field of motoric skills, fine and gross motoric skills, and the, let me say, the emotional environment where the child is embedded in. And these are things which we have to look at, and not only to assessment and so on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I go to Brioni.
Hi, I'm very sorry because I popped in at 11 and I thought it started at 11. So I really wanted to attend to all, but I just misread it. But what I heard from everybody from 11 on, and I think we will get the presentation too, to read it afterwards. Yeah, for me, what now is happening is that old structures are falling apart and that it gives rise to new things to emerge. But that's in the beginning a little bit uncomfortable because we don't know yet what the new will be. So we're just sticking a little bit to the old and wanting to have the new to emerge. So it's more like a transformation process of where we're in now as humanity. And yeah, I would love to have, I already said it yesterday, but love to have more meetings together to really work together and collaborate. And I'm not aware if it's already in it, but my thing is always is intuition, and is the element of intuition emphasized in it. I hear play, but I think that for the future, there could be so much done for children and adults around, and yeah, enhancement of intuition, and we really need that for the future.
Thank you, Brioni. And now I go to Geraldine. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Well, I was pleased to hear the positive assessment about the working group, because I really believe that we need everybody to be on board. We have all the member states plus other countries participating, but we really need expertise and passion from all of you who work outside of the ministries and who can really share your expertise and influence the way the systems are organized. So it's really precious to hear your voice, and I really hope we can carry on working together.
Thank you. Thank you. We will do. I go to Helma. She is in the working group also, your working group. Helma, unlock your phone.
Well, first of all, I'm calling from Amsterdam. Thank you very much, Mathias, for your ongoing struggle to do something against a standardized testing idea. I think there are many parallels when all the criticism that you and Peter formulated with the PISA, and we should maybe try to work together with people who do have this criticism towards PISA as well. I realize this subject is way too big, too important also to take an hour like we do now. And we certainly, Mathias and me, will have some discussions about what to do and how to formulate more strongly maybe alternatives, and how to focus more on the lack of reliability when you test young children, because there are many characteristics, and one of them is the playfulness, but there's more that prevents them from really being tested reliably. That's what I would like to add to it. But thank you very much, Mathias, for all the work in and without and outside the working group. Thank you.
And I come to Esther Bronnen from the office of Mr. Goiking. I thank you once more for working with us and for co-hosting this event. Would you like to share a few words with us?
Yeah, of course. Unfortunately, I can't join to the whole meeting because first of all, Mr. Gölking was talking and I need to do other stuff. But you heard me?
Yes, yes,
You can
we
Okay.
hear you. Yes.
So, but what I heard was there was very interesting stuff, and I think maybe the points I understand. They're very clear, and it's always good to talk with a lot of people about this topic, because in the end we all need to protect children and the childhood, because if we don't do this, nobody do it. Yes, that's all.
Okay.
It's very nice to stay in contact with good people like you, Matthias, or the other one here, all in this team. It's always good to have a lot of contacts.
Okay, thank you very much. I think I go back to Mathias for the last reaction, and then I close the meeting, and our next meeting will be on the 1st of December, and then we will talk about assessment, and we will talk about the outcome of the study, the Erasmus study that is being done by X-Way Learning for Wellbeing. And but now I go to Mathias just for a last reaction.
Well, I believe we have Chiara there.
I started with Chiara.
Oh,
she is twice. She is twice in the system.
One is for managing the chat and everything, and the other one it's for the others. Okay.
Well, basically, I want to say thank you for inviting me to speak to this group, because I think it is increasingly important that we come together from our different backgrounds, whether it might be a Steiner education or an interest in well-being, or in holistic systemic thinking, or in policy making, or in sort of global questions of early childhood development, because it's not just that we need to work with, we need the support in these groups against a very strong global force that still insists on sort of, as Daniel says, this notion of positivism, of subjectification, of simple answers to very complex questions. And as we know, there is a simple answer to any complex question, and it's always the wrong answer. So I suppose this is very important, and I would like to thank you for this opportunity. I also think, and I want to go back to the importance of doing this in the context of the European Union, for instance, because the European Union is an exemplar of diversity and should be taking a much more a proactive role in promoting, not just internally, but globally, how we can sort of address this diversity. And also, and this is not a one-way street, and I think we have to be increasingly clear that when we talk about learning with each other, that for instance, as we speak in the context of COVID-19 pandemic, countries outside of the European Union, countries in the global south, countries that some of us still sort of naively frame as developing countries, are making experiences and developing solutions that are so important, would be so important for us to learn from in the context of Europe, for instance. And we do see, and that's another discussion to be had at EU level, we do see, for instance, a much greater integration of early childhood development, early childhood education, early childhood care, policies and practices in countries in Latin America, in Asia, in some parts of Africa, where the thinking, not always the practice, but the thinking and the policy, and sometimes the practice, is actually more advanced than the discussions that we have in the context of Europe, because we still tend to think education and care, well, in a bracket, early child education and care, but we still tend to think well-being, development, health, nutrition, education, care in separate boxes. And we should urgently learn with countries that have actually made a change in this way. And we do see, and I think that's quite interesting in terms of crisis, that some of these countries that have introduced holistic, integrated, broadly integrated early childhood systems, they could react much better than some European countries to the disruption caused by a pandemic, for instance, because they had systems and policies in place that don't stop with sort of the individual child or the individualized preschool that is disconnected to the rest of the world.
So I think we must close now. We are 34 minutes, 36 minutes past the closing time. So thank you very much. And now I close the meeting, and I wish you much strength. Be careful, take care of yourself in this period of COVID. And I say goodbye. Thank you.
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you.